Well, boys, our next guest played over 1,300 games for 8 different teams in the NHL, won a Stanley Cup back in 2006. The Wizard, Ray Whitney, joining us on the Athletic Hockey Show. Ray, thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, guys, my pleasure. I know it's an early morning, but I got kids, so I'm up anyway.
Oh, we really appreciate it. Everybody's up early. Everybody's loving playoff hockey. And it's funny. I know you're working for the league now. We'll get to that in a minute. But your career's fingerprints seem to be all over this Final Four. I mean, you played for 3 of the 4 teams. You played for guys like Paul Maurice, with guys like Rod Brindamore and Jamie Benn. You won a cup with Carolina. I know you're not allowed to root because you work for the league, but is it tough not watching these games and cheering for a whole bunch of guys that you know?
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, I didn't just realize until now. Yeah, you're right. 3 of the 4 I played for, and that just means I was basically a suitcase for a lot of my time. But certainly, I think Carolina, winning a championship with a team kind of puts your loyalties to that organization. Obviously, Roddy was a big part of that. I played with him, and but then you look at Florida. I played with Eric Stahl as well, and Mo coached me there for a couple of years. So I've had good memories from both organizations and Dallas finishing my career there. But it's bittersweet. But I think if I had to go pointing my finger to one direction, it would probably still be Carolina.
Ray, obviously I covered you down here in Florida, and you had such a consistent career both with Florida and Carolina. I think 100 goals almost for both teams in 4 years. But here down in Florida, you became such a fan favorite right away. You brought in during a tough 97-98 season, but top 30 goals. Then you were around during that 98-2000 season in a pre-loser point era. To me, one of the best teams I still ever covered. Unfortunately, you went down in that game, that series against New Jersey. But we've seen this arena packed with passionate Panther fans, and I think during the years of losing, a lot of people started to make fun of this franchise, think that they didn't have a fan base that could support it. I'm sure it actually doesn't surprise you that if you give a reason for the fans down here in South Florida to show up, that they actually do and know the sport and love this sport.
Yeah, for sure, Mike. I mean, it's obviously not a traditional hockey market. So when we went down there with the new building in Sunrise, I know I finished my the time in Miami. I played the last season down in Miami Arena first, but the crowds were good. When you start losing, I think as a franchise, if you don't have success and continued success in a place like Miami, where, let's be honest, there's a lot of things they can do. It's not like you're stuck in the frozen north and just begging for a hockey game. So what you're seeing now is not surprising. I think there are loyal fans down there, and there's a lot of excited fans, but giving them something like this to be excited about is probably what's going to make them come out even more. And I think you're seeing it now. It's a great place to play. Obviously it's a fun place to play, but like I said, there's a lot of things to do in South Florida. So if you're not winning as a hockey team, there are other options for them to do. But right now the team is exciting to watch. They got Matthew Tkachuk down there, who's really bringing a little bit of everything for them in terms of not just goals and production, but he gets that pesky little attitude out there, and he brings something that hockey fans, if you're a hockey fan, really love. And if you're with that side, you love it. If you're obviously on the other side, you don't. But he's a big product down there, I think, right now for them. But he's got a great knack for scoring big goals. He's got a great knack for changing the pace of a game just by giving a guy a sneaky glove, giving a guy a punch in the head. Chewing on that damn mouth guard like it's a big piece of gum. I mean, he's a fun guy to watch, and he's a guy to get excited about. And I think down there they're going to have a great time here for the next few years with him.
Right. Russo loves when I throw out stats. He mentioned about 100 goals apiece for those 2 teams. I looked it up. Carolina, he scored 119 goals. Florida, 97. So you were close, Russo.
I was close. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't. Matt kept taking the empty nets on me, so I couldn't quite get to 100.
Ray, you mentioned Tkachuk, and Bobrovsky is obviously the big story in Florida, but I'm curious, is there anything else you've noticed in this team? Like, they're so talented that we've been saying for weeks now, they're not a typical 8 seed. This team is talented, but it took some time to get this team to click. Like, what else have you noticed in these playoffs that's really got that team going, aside from the obvious Bobrovsky and Tkachuk scoring big goals?
Yeah, that's a great point, Jesse. I think nobody in the hockey world would say they're an 8 seed team coming into it. I think they, when you make trades like that, you get rid of guys like Huberdeau and Weegar. I mean, Tkachuk coming in, it's sometimes when you're adding elements, it takes a little bit of time for you guys to all find your niche and your actual role. And adjust to it and accept it. And there's no way that's an 8 seed team, especially after the year they had prior. So that is not surprising to me. What's surprising, or not surprising so much, but what I really notice is their calmness that they're playing with. They're playing so loose, like they're smiling, they're having fun, they're giggling on the bench. And this is in the fourth overtime still. So how they're playing as a group is it's almost like a machine. They each know what their role is. They each know what their jobs are. And they're doing it with some fun. They're doing it together. You see on every scrum, they're all in there together. They're all getting their gloves dirty, and they're supporting each other. So I know Bob and Matthew are the ones that are driving it, I guess. But you look at Montour's play in the back end, and you look at guys like Lomberg, who they bring that energy, and they all seem to find what they're doing. Even my old man, Eric Stahl, who has been a number one center most of his life, is now finding a role as a fourth line center. And what a luxury for Paul Maurice to have when that's going to be your fourth line center, where you can have him on the ice at any point. So it's just the depth is impressive, but it's the looseness that they're playing with is amazing to me. That I guess if you get in as an 8 seed, they're thinking there's no pressure, but now by the conference finals, I think there's got to be some pressure on everybody. But I just don't see them playing with a lot of nerves right now. I think it's just amazing how relaxed they are.
Ray, got to get into your role with the league's Department of Player Safety and working with George Parros. And I honest to God, don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but you talk about two different kinds of players in their NHL careers. I mean, you Google your name, the word classy comes up nonstop. George Parros is still appearing in people's nightmares from his playing days. But when you're trying to make a tough decision, does that help the balance to have a Ray Whitney who's not used to, having to deal with certain things like that? I don't ever remember you being a dirty player or having a dirty play in your career versus a George Parros, who, like I said, is a scary human being.
Yeah. George on the ice was scary. Yes. Anybody who knows George off the ice knows he's truly one of the best gentlemen that we have in our game. And he's a smart guy. Obviously, I don't know if you guys know, he went to Princeton. He is a very smart guy, and he knows the rule book really well. But it's a tough job, guys. I'll be honest with you, because there's always going to be half of the world that doesn't like the decision you make, regardless. So it's you have to have thick skin a little bit with it. But for me, you're right. I look at the game a little differently than George did. I was the guy getting the hits more than taking or giving them. So I take most of our decisions. I take it from the point of view of the guy getting hit. What did he do to, did he make a bad choice to put him in that position to get hit? And you'd be surprised, guys, how many times that George is at a suspension where I am not at a suspension. I'm more of a guy who looks at the guy getting hit or the guy who received the hit as opposed to the guy giving it, because that's the part of the game I played. I didn't have a lot of hits in my career, but guys turning their backs as a defense mechanism now, thinking they won't get hit, is a problem for us in the league right now. And people always go, "Oh, he hit him in the numbers. He hit him from behind." I'm like, well, did he, or did he turn when he shouldn't have turned? And was he aware of his surroundings? I mean, some of these open ice hits, I didn't get hit in 23 years in the open ice like that. So a lot of it for me, I put on the onus on the players getting hit as opposed to the guys giving it. So with head contact, though, and the pace and the speed of the game, you're always going to have head contact just about every hit. So it's a tough job. It really is. And we're trying to be as consistent as we can, but understanding that, we're not going to make everybody happy. And obviously the actions last night by Jamie Benn, we're going to have to deal with at some point here today. So, it's a tough job, but it's an important job. But certainly I think George does a really great job of doing it. It's not an easy one.
By the way, you had 167 hits in 1,330 games. I just looked it up while you were talking.
Those were vicious ones, though.
Hey, Wizard, two things. Can you tell everybody about the process? I've actually shadowed George Parros and Damien in Department of Player Safety probably about 6 times. It's a really fascinating job. I think that all fans should actually get that opportunity to watch how everything is clipped. Talk about the process today. The way I understand it is essentially you will wake up today or even last night to an email that just says with the clip, the actions of the game and bullet point and thoughts, and that's how you give it. And the other question, if you could relay everybody your first ever conversation with George Parros. I understand from talking to George over the years, it happened during warm-ups before a game while you guys were both playing.
Yeah, I'll get to that one first. George just had his twin girls, and I happened to talk to my wife Bridget, before I went to the game, and she happened to mention it. I don't know how she knew, and we really don't know each other. But Big George is stretching at the red line and eyeballing everybody at our zone. Actually, and I don't stretch. If you guys know or watch me, I don't stretch. I basically just try to goof around in front of the camera or mess with people getting interviewed more than I do stretching. So I went down and just pretended to stretch for a couple minutes and said, "Hey, big guy, congratulations on the Twins." And he looked at me like, "Man, this guy's talking to me. I've never had somebody talk to me, but at the red line before." So he didn't really know what to do. He goes, "Well, thanks, I guess." And then as the game went on, I realized, well, maybe that will make sure he doesn't take a good run at me today. So, you show some compassion or some empathy for somebody and congratulate them on something like that. Hopefully he doesn't take a good run at you. But and to get to your other point with the process, yeah, we knew last night we were going to have a hearing. George will send those clips, like you said, Mike. They get clipped to us. They get sent out to us within probably 10 or 15 minutes of each hit. We'll get it right away, and then George will send out an email asking for our thoughts on it, if it's something that he's looking at closely. So then you send out what your thoughts are on it, and then at the end of the night, he'll decide whether we're going to move forward with it. So by the end of the night, we know we're going to have a hearing or not the next day. So I wake up this morning knowing at some point we're going to have one, and then we'll move on from there. The process is quite interesting for those who don't have never heard of how we do it. The player gets on and talks, the general manager gets to talk, the agent talks about the character, the PA gets on and makes sure that everything is okay, and then our side gives our opinion on it, and then we get off and we deliberate together as a group. So it's a big process. There's a lot of people involved, and like I said, it's an important part of our game, but not one that makes everybody happy. I understand.
Semi-related to that, it's a conversation we were kind of having in the press box here in Dallas last night. Not specifically about Benn's particular situation, but I'm curious. We were wondering how much does what part of the game the hit happens. How much does that play into it? Because we were comparing it to Petrangelo's, and Petrangelo's slash on Draisaitl happens at the very end of the game. He gets the game misconduct, but he barely gets tossed out for any of it. And then obviously Ben missed the entire game. So not specifically this situation, but in general, how much of a factor does that play in the decision making?
Well, it can go into a little bit of a decision making. Like you said, he basically missed the entire game. I think it only happened a minute and a half into it or 2 minutes into it. But basically, the whole game is the argument can be made that that's already a 1-game suspension right there. So that can come into effect. That yes, we can use that if we want to, but generally we try to stick to the act itself and where did the act fall for prior incidents and where were we on those ones. So we'll probably go to that more than anything. And but you're right though, Jesse, you can use that. Petrangelo's at the end. I know it didn't mean anything at the end, but which is why he got the game the next night. But we can use it if we want. Whether George decides to or not, that'll be up to him.
Last one before we let you go, and I'll be real quick with this one. Ray, do you foresee a time where the player's injury isn't so important in deciding the suspension time? And I think Pietrangelo was one we discussed on the show, because had he broken Leon Draisaitl's arm, obviously the suspension would probably be a lot bigger. But the intent seemed to be pretty obvious to a lot of people. Do you foresee a time where maybe that's not as important?
No, I don't. I think, there's a lot of acts out there that the speed of our game, and anytime you have, a so-called weapon in your hand and it's flying around, I think you can always, there's always going to be some kind of injury that happens or can happen. And if it's if it's an infraction, it's, like intentional, like you said, like Petro's, if there is a big injury in that, obviously it's got to change the suspension outlook on it, just because, there was some intent on the play. So I don't see right now, Robert, I really don't see that being a factor. I think you always got to take the injury into consideration, because, a lot of acts, can be create injury regardless. And I think that if it's intentional, you got to take an injury into effect a little bit more. So no,
Ray,
I don't think so.
Yeah. Ray, just lastly, I just want to ask you about your career. I always tell people I've covered hundreds and hundreds of players that love to win. I would put you on the list of number 1 or 2 on the players that most hated to lose. You were a miserable SOB after a loss. I still remember a little battle you and I got into after a 9-1 loss in Toronto once, so with like 3 games left in the season. How much do you think that drove you during an incredibly successful career? And then when you were on that mountaintop in 2006, lifting that cup, it had to just be the most elated experience of your life.
Yeah. And I do remember that, Mike. It wasn't. I didn't have one just with you either. I think I've had a few FUs with a lot of them, and then all with respect. But you're right. I've always been a sore loser. Ask my wife. Ask my mom. Ask my kids. I've never liked to lose. I don't like losing at all, and it's probably what kept me in the league as long as I was as a little guy, especially back in the 90s. I have a big competitive drive to me. I'm a very competitive guy, even though, when you look at my hits and my penalty minutes, you're thinking he's not. But there's different ways to show that competitiveness, and that's competing with pucks and winning board battles and playing as hard as you can all the time. And so I always tried to do that, and I always hated to lose, whether it was 9-1, whether it was 3-2 overtime. I just if the music's not on after the game, it really bothered me, and I got better, Mike, after we won. I got better of accepting some losses a little bit better. But when you do win, and especially we won in Game 7 of the finals, the elation, it's something you can't even describe to people, which is why the intensity of getting there is so exciting. It surprises me is how well Florida is playing relaxed right now, because it's hard to get there, guys. It really is. 23 years. I got there one time, and it's hard to do. And I got better at the losing part later in my life, but I certainly was a mean little bastard. You're right. When I was around you, so I apologize for that a few years later. 20 years later.
You have no. Trust me, you have nothing to apologize. I used to respect the shit out of you for it. And honestly, I mean, you're still one of my favorite players I've ever covered. Absolutely hilarious. And not to mention just a great goal scorer. I mean, it was a pleasure to watch it.
Thanks, guys.
And trust me, Ray. Jesse and I have FU moments with Russo on a weekly basis. So you
guys feel my pain. You guys know what I'm talking about.
We're not even coming off of a
loss. We absolutely are sympathetic to your situation.